What is up, everyone? After my video rant yesterday, we are now going to go over the first solar swing setup for real. And so what I did was I tweeted a daily chart of for solar, and I identified the 521 bar as being bar A, 522 as being B, 523 C, and then 524 as D. And I asked, how would you set up this as a swing? Is it worth it? What are the pros and cons? And so let's start to go through all those because these nuances are important. And so, yes, on this day, we did get a upgrade by, I think, UBS. Then this was really the big high volume day for solar and some of the rest of the sector. The news was admittedly a little bit more convoluted on this, but essentially like China had a meeting on some of the tariffs. And again, in some of the comments on that other tweet, it's not so much about interpreting news. Like, there's some news I will definitely try to interpret, particularly M&A, because that's a skill set I had developed. But for a lot of news, it's mostly binary for me, right? If something has news, I generally want to be with the trend and trying to capture that new price discovery. If something doesn't have news, I'm more interested in mean reversion. And that difference is really, really big. So a lot of people were interested in shorting First Solar on 522. I had no interest because of my system, which is, hey, this is kind of fresh news and huge volume. And now let's look big picture. So on a long-term chart, this is a 3-year weekly, we are breaking two very big picture highs. I think, this might even be, is this all-time highs? Let me see if I can quickly pull that up. Yeah, this is all-time highs, it looks like. So that is a very, very big breakout on all time frames at this point. This is new ground. And so some of the variables we're talking about now is, one, we've got a news catalyst. Two, we've got insane, incredible volume. Let's see. Let's look at on the daily chart for the last year. This was the highest volume bar. So now essentially, right, there is various news catalysts out. Really, we are breaking out to all-time highs, and we are doing so on very, 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 very high volume. Not to mention that, like, this intraday setup, this daily setup, even against 200, that's a pretty beautiful setup. Like, you could argue there's some people that probably want to be long here or even above those daily highs. And so there were multiple ways to potentially get long this, but what I really wanted to focus on is after it makes this move, because I personally was not watching this on the prior days. And that doesn't mean the opportunity is lost. Anytime something does a really epic move, you still want to keep an eye on that, because so often the epic in-play moves are the ones that set up and continue to go higher. Think about some of the crazy legs AI or Carvana have had, or Zoom and mRNA back in the day. So you really want to stay abreast of these charts as they make these moves. And the most important bar to me is this bar C on 523. A lot of times I've talked about how you want to think about retracements as a percentage of the overall move. And 50% I just use as a base retracement. I don't do any of that Fibonacci crap. And so if we look at this bar here had a low of about 213 and a high of 253. So we had a 40-point range. So technically the 50% retracement would be about 230. We did not go anywhere near there. Pretty much this bar spent almost all of its time in the upper quartile of that move. That is extremely, extremely bullish after such a big move. This stock is up 25% in 2 days, and we can barely pull back 10 points. That is a really, really, really big sign, this little inside bar there. I also like that the volume decreased on that. It just shows really a level of price acceptance where it's like, okay, this is the new price. Like, nobody wants to sell 245, 240, 235, 230, despite it being up so much in 2 days. So this bar is very, very telling. And then the next day we break above those highs. So there's a couple ways to play this. So in general, because this is a daily pattern, as I often say, I want to match my trading to the time frame I'm trading. If it's an intraday chart and an intraday trade that I'm making, I want to really make sure there's an intraday setup. If it's a daily setup and it's a daily swing, I really want to trade that daily chart. And so I think the safest place to probably enter is above these highs, which were around, 254 or so. And so that's one way to enter. Then depending on how you structure it, if there's a decent intraday setup that day on 524, you can give it to the lows of that day. So potentially give to, what is this, roughly 251. Or you can even, if you really like the setup, choose to give it to the lows of the prior day. The true stop, I mean, it's tough. You can, I mean, and really there's even a third way, which is if this breaks 254, you can even give it the really, really tight stop of if it gets back below 254, you're going to hit out. And when I'm doing that daily trade, I'm then generally going to give it to prior bar lows. And so this actually hasn't stopped you out yet. And so one thing I want to touch on is then also this intraday on 524. So let me quickly jump to that. Let me see. So the day we got above was this day here. And so if we look at this, this was pretty much just like a pure clean break. I assume we did wick towards the beginning of this bar, but then we break 254. I wasn't watching this on the time. I was traveling for Memorial Day. So I actually don't know whether this was clean, but regardless, we break 254. You can then give to the lows of this bar. You can then, like I said, give to the prior, and we really go off to the races. And so it's almost like with the SMCI or some of the semi breakouts where it breaks that level and it's just gone. And all of these pullbacks are so shallow. Like essentially we go another 5% and we can barely pull back 1%. And even this consolidation is really nice. And the rest of that day, we hold up very, very well. I don't have VWAP in this chart. I'd assume we're holding above VWAP pretty much the whole day. And even on this pullback to 270, we find some real support there. And we close in that upper quartile, maybe even like upper 10 percentile of that day. That is, from an intraday basis and a daily basis, exactly what you want to see. What I also love, and so I know some people will say hindsight, and to be fair, I actually did not trade this one. Like I said, I was traveling. But I have discussed this concept before, and some people that follow my work closely, Nathan and Ozzy, they very rightly made a comparison to this APLS. And not that it's the same exact thing, but the concepts are very similar. And this APLS started to have issues with one of their drugs. So this down move was caused by safety concerns for their drug, and huge volume, huge breakdown. And this inside bar is incredible, incredible, incredible. And the beauty of this, a little bit even better than the first solar chart, is you have such a tight bar here where if you're giving to prior bar highs, like it's just such tight risk. And so what I would say is, like, when this bar is that tight, I'm not going to give it to this specific level on the breakdown. I'm definitely going to give it to prior bar highs. Whereas with First Solar, I feel a little bit conflicted as far as which I would do. And one other point I want to bring up is some people said they don't see this long here because the stock is just so overextended. And it's like, well, I don't know. Maybe we need to change our definition of overextended, because first of all, this did the move on a catalyst, same for APLS. The other thing is, if we wanted to sell off, I think once you get a tight inside bar, like this bar C there, it makes the likelihood of the bottom just falling out and this thing just getting wrecked after that break pretty damn low. And again, like this comes up so often, it's not about, like, I find so often traders overly focus on what they perceive to be the worst case scenario as opposed to really what's the expected value. Like, okay, yeah, maybe sometimes it then catches a downgrade and we're back to 230 or something, or 240. It's not about the worst case. It's more so what happens in the aggregate. And I would argue that when stocks are breaking out to all-time highs, when you have these positive news catalysts lining up, that leads to this feedback loop of more upgrades, and news actually probably tends to be favored on your side for something like this. And again, this bar, when we can't pull back like that, I do think the the negative skew is pretty cushioned on something like that. So yeah, I'm not scared to buy stuff like this. And so there's been a couple times I've discussed patterns like this, and so let's dissect the nuances. In this specific situation, and APLS really, I mean, whether it's to the upside or the downside, it's the same. But we've got a news catalyst, we've got a really big bar, we've got potentially big level breakouts or breakdowns, and then we've got a very tight inside bar. And you see this pattern quite a lot. And so for those of you that are curious, like how do I find edge, yada yada yada, you observe stocks like this, and then you build systems around them, and you build hypotheses. So what someone would really need to do is take some of the variables I discussed and then run with them and backtest them and make them your own and figure out what is the best system to capture this. I used to do some of this. My data isn't going to be up to date because I don't do too much of this anymore. But it's kind of like the ball's in your court to then run with these concepts. Like one other thing I would touch on too is let's go to this. I think it was ACB. Maybe it was CGC. It was CGC. So one thing that was interesting is I work with a very talented trader, and a lot of times, like, I just don't have the interest in backtesting some of this stuff, nor am I necessarily going to be doing a ton of this overall, because I am trying to trade less, not more. And so I brought to him my hypothesis that sometimes you get some really strong up moves that then have a counter trend, and the counter trend will be very orderly, and then that counter trend breaks and you can really get some nice legs. So without going into the variables, I'll let people figure out the variables on their own, because this guy did the legwork and I don't want to ruin some of the work he's done. But essentially this strategy proved effective in his backtest, and it's something he's since implemented. I don't remember what led us to do the backtest, but he was able to do the backtest ahead of this trade and then essentially capture this turn and make like a nice leg. And some similar examples, not that this is so similar, but like one chart I think is worth discussing is even this DJT, which is much more of a garbage stock than CGC, but this had so deep of a pullback, holding prior bar highs just so many days in a row, where I do think someone out there should be running with some of these variables and doing that back test. What happens if you buy this break and give to those lows? This is another case where it would have worked out pretty okay. And so someone on Twitter pinged me today. I think it was figure out what this ticker was, but it was a good one. 1 second, because it's going to be worth it. Oh yeah, it was Alpha Sierra Tango Sierra. And it's so funny because someone asked me like, oh, would I consider this ticker a short? And sure enough, this ticker actually followed the same exact pattern that I had backtested with that buddy of mine, where we have this strong drive, we have this kind of pullback that then breaks prior highs. And a lot of times, especially in a strong market where things are really running, you can get this follow through where it then breaks out from there, or at least depending on the size of the pullback, the reward even to test those highs ends up being pretty appealing. And so then I did another tweet today about the parabolic count, thanks to Moist Mango. And so let's look at this. Like this was pretty much one leg. We do a shallow pullback, then we break out again. And now if we look at this yearly chart, like this is a pretty big breakout. Not only is it a breakout on the recent intraday price action, kind of above 575, but even on the yearly, it's a big breakout. Not only that, but the volume this day was enormous. So I think the person that posed this question to me took some losses shorting it, but this is the type of stock where I have no interest in shorting it, because I consider this day one. Right? It's day one as far as this intraday breakout. It's day one as far as the big picture daily, or sorry, this recent daily breakout, the big picture daily. And so all those things make me very not wanting to short it. Never say never. Like if this did something amazing intraday, I never say never. But the reality is, even on an intraday basis, right, this is where we're really breaking out, and then we just never capitulate. And again, I want a mega capitulation if I'm going to if I'm going to short this and not think long. If anything, I think what's really nice is this starts to fade off. Again, I don't want any piece of this anyways. We then reclaim, we then get really tight. And buying this break above, what is it, 850-ish or something? 845 or so. And then like that's like a really interesting breakout. And let's see, does it stop you out anywhere? So you do actually catch like a decent leg as far as prior bar highs goes, and like you could argue, oh no, you miss out on this later move, but that's totally okay. My goal was never to catch the whole move. It's just in the aggregate, am I catching enough of the leg to justify the risk reward and give good expected value? So this ended up kind of being a hodgepodge episode, largely derived from this first solar daily, but a lot of important concepts. Hope those all help. And then again, make these concepts your own. Like figure out the nuances, make this your own playbook trade, do the back testing. And I think this is a daily setup. I think this is a daily setup that has a lot of potential and is something I used to do a lot more of. I really, this is also, by the way, the type of thing that you can do stock fetcher scans for. I've mentioned stock fetcher as that is a daily chart scanner that you can really customize, and it's fairly robust. And that was how I searched for a lot of daily chart setups. And you can really easily customize charts like this with their program. Hope that all helps. Best of luck. Let me know of any questions. Thank you all.